Welcome to Beyond Research, a podcast brought to you by Research Nova Scotia.
Today, I'm joined by Dr. Jessie-Lee McIsaac from Mount Saint Vincent University. Dr. McIsaac leads the Early Childhood Collaborative Research Centre at the Mount and is a Tier 2 Canada Research Chair in Early Childhood Diversity and Transitions. Thank you for joining us today, Jessie-Lee.
Thanks so much for having me.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and the Early Childhood Collaborative Research Centre at the Mount?
Sure. So the goal of our research at the Early Childhood Collaborative Research Center is to look at ways that we can enhance well-being during early childhood by ensuring that the environments in which children live, learn, and play are supportive to their well-being. So that means looking at the environments and ways that we can better adjust the characteristics of the environment so that children have access to the things that they need to be well. It also means working to better understand what families need to support their young child as well. So the work that we do really tries to understand what's already happening and look at ways that we can adjust those environments so that children and families can have access to the things that they need to develop in the best way that children can during that time.
Great. And the center is relatively new. Can you tell us a little bit about how that came to be or how it came to be established at the Mount?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's really been increasing attention on early childhood and related policies, greater recognition really of the importance of the early years as the foundation for lifelong learning, health, and well-being. And across the country, internationally, there's been this attention growing. And as a result, there's also been different policies and programs that have been developed to better support early childhood development and ensure that families have what they need. So the research chair really came about because of this increasing attention. And when I started the position, I knew what a big focus of my work would be was looking at these existing policies and programs and better understanding whether or not these actions are helping families. And if they are, then that's great, but also really what's needed to adjust these existing supports for families to ensure that they have what they need for optimal environments for health, development, and learning.
That's great. And it's so evident how passionate you are about early childhood research. And I'm curious, what initially attracted you to this area of research?
So my earlier graduate training had been focused on school environments, school-age children and youth, and looking at the environments that schools play and supporting a child's well-being. I think with the sort of change and increasing focus on early childhood, I just became more and more interested in how we can really set the stage early in a child's life. There has been kind of a difference in how early childhood programs, services, policies have also been delivered across the country, and particularly here in Nova Scotia, where early childhood services and supports programs has come under our provincial Ministry of Education. So now it's called the Department of Education and Early Childhood Development. So as a result, there is sort of a broader attention to the importance of early childhood and how that supports the transition into the school age experience of children. So really from my prior experience in school age children and youth, it's sort of been a natural progression, I suppose, to better understand how those early years shape a child's overall well-being and health.
And you touched on it a little there, but you did see that opportunity with the government to restructure things so that your team could have that direct impact on Nova Scotians and their families. Can you tell us just a little bit more about how that came to be and why it's so critical?
Yeah, so I had the opportunity during my postdoctoral fellowship at Dalhousie, which was really focused on knowledge mobilization and particularly ways that we can better partner as academics with government using an engaged scholarship approach. So engaged scholarship looks at the ways that we can develop authentic partnerships to ensure that the research that we produce is not only building knowledge, but it's also supporting practice. It's actually having an impact on the world. So I actually had the opportunity to study what that looks like. So the actual practice of doing research through collaboration, and found found that some important tenets of how to do this are things like building relationships and trust. So ensuring that there's the time spent to develop relationships so that there's an understanding of the intention of research, and also a trust that that the results will be used in a formative way to help to support adjustments that better meet the collective goals that we have around supporting childhood development and learning and well-being. Oftentimes, research is sort of developed by the researcher. The research ideas comes from the researcher. So really developing a shared ownership in the objectives of the work to ensure that there is kind of the buy-in, but also that it leads back to trust, that there's a trust that there's a mandate in which we're both embarking on that lead to that collective goal. Partnering with government also means that that's two worlds being brought together that often work in different timelines. There's different priorities, and the timeline that's required for government decision-making is also a really important part of building that relationship with the government to ensure that the research is not only done well, but also the results will more likely be used by decision makers in the end.
That is so fantastic. It would be very cool to see more of this collaboration across disciplines and governments. And I think, there have been so many examples that have come out of your collaborations with government, and PrePrimary is obviously the one that immediately comes to mind, and an example of a shift in the early childhood education system and how it operates as a publicly funded program. So from your perspective, why was the introduction of PrePrimary such an achievement for you and your team?
So a part of the success of this early introduction of they were called the early years centers, and looking at using the school as the hub for families with young children, was this early learning program that was for 4-year-olds the year before school entry here in Nova Scotia. And the success of that was really, it was a no fee program for schools. It was a universal program. Any family with a child with the age eligibility within the catchment could attend. And, families really told us in our early work that they really appreciated this program that provided a real support for them. It not only reduces challenges of access like the costs of childcare, which can be very difficult for families. It also supported a transition into the school environment, which was really important. So those, early days of the first year of school can be really challenging. And families told us that they felt that the program was really ensuring that their child transitioned well into grade primary, and they were able to succeed really well. They told us about the benefits to their social and emotional development, those types of things that were really essential to ensuring that they felt comfortable as well. So not only supporting the child's transition into school, but also the family's relationship with the school. So the PrePrimary program operates using a play-based curriculum. So it really looks at the ways in which children can learn through play. And that's a really essential part of the work that happens in early childhood, is not thinking about that traditional kind of instruction that's sitting down and, working on worksheets, but it's really building on children's interests and experiences, and using the educators, early childhood educators that are so critical in this program to guide their learning through, again, the interests of children. And it's a really beautiful thing to see the programs that have been established. And, I think next year should be the last year of its full implementation across the province. And the amount of families that have had access to this program that didn't already attend a formal childcare is evident that this is filling a gap in services for families and for young children in the province.
That's great. I've heard you talk about some of the unique challenges facing Nova Scotian families, those in marginalized communities. You speak a lot about the vulnerabilities and the staggering number of children who are entering the school system with vulnerabilities. Obviously, PrePrimary is, I expect that to have some sort of an impact on how many children are entering primary with those vulnerabilities. What are some of the ways that we can invest in our children earlier, so fewer children are starting school with vulnerabilities. And I know pre-primary probably plays a role in that, but would love to hear your thoughts.
For sure. So we know in Nova Scotia, we use a tool called the Early Development Instrument, which was developed by the Alfred Center for Child Studies at McMaster University. And this tool is a renowned international population level tool that looks at children's developmental progress at school entry. So it's a tool that grade primary teachers complete on their class, and it's been done on several rounds here in Nova Scotia. So it really gives us a good understanding of children's development at school entry over time. So we are actually quite lucky here in Nova Scotia to have these data to help us better understand the changes in children's development over time. So these data tell us that more than 1 in 4 children are starting school with a developmental vulnerability. And the trends have shown that there has actually been an increase in vulnerability over time. And so this, to me, as a researcher, signals first the importance of understanding why. Why are we seeing an increase in vulnerability over time? And it also, as a researcher who likes to understand environments and the not only just kind of the quantitative reasons behind the why, but the qualitative reasons of the experiences of families and what's happening in communities. It signals to me the importance of studying that and really understanding why environments are not always setting children up to develop at the expected kind of milestones that we expect to see at school entry. And how can we better optimize these environments to support children's development so that more children are coming to school with the developmental health at the expected level to be successful later on in life. So some ways that we're studying that, one are things like looking at the impact of something like a universal early childhood education program, like the PrePrimary program. Another project that I'm involved with that's looking at the social and emotional health of children and supporting educators in both regulated childcare and in pre-primary programs to ensure that the practices that are being implemented are supportive of the development of these really important social and emotional skills. We know that these skills are really important in helping a child succeed in many aspects of life. Things like self-regulation, really being able to understand how to interact, social relationships with peers. Those early social and emotional skills are so critical. So another way that we will be trying to understand how these skills are developed over time is looking at what's actually being done with respect to practices. So how are the educators supporting this? And how can we support the educators as to have the resources, the skills, the tools that they need to be able to create these environments in which children will develop these skills? So we'll be able to look at the programs that are implementing this program called the pyramid model that's looking at best practices in social and emotional learning to address challenging behaviors that are sometimes coming up, and trying to understand whether or not that's having an impact on children's developmental health at school entry, for example, through the Early Development Instrument.
It's so interesting and incredible work. And something I found incredibly interesting was the focus on research related to nutrition in early childhood development and education. Can you speak to nutrition a little bit and how that plays into that overall picture?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a passion of mine and one that I had the opportunity to really dive deep during my PhD and postdoc. Looking at nutrition in schools. But the work in early childhood has transitioned a bit more to look at responsive feeding. So responsive feeding is not just about what we eat. So it's not just about the quality of food, but it's about how we provide environments to children in which we're responsive to their cues. So young kids are really quite good at regulating their own food intake. And I think sometimes we as adults like to control that a little bit. Sometimes we as adults need to check ourselves sometimes to really listen to the cues that children are giving to us us, especially young children again. And, their bodies are growing in different ways than our needs are as adults. And really being able to sort of provide those environments in which they're able to enjoy a variety of foods. So certainly the types of foods that we provide are important, but also things like just sitting down with them, having the same kinds of food that our children are having, and encouraging them to follow their own hunger and fullness cues. Because I think, again, as adults, we eat for different reasons. And I think encouraging children to just enjoy their food and take the time to do so is so important. So some of the research that we've done, which was funded by Research Nova Scotia, was looking to better understand what some of the challenges were that adults and caregivers were facing with young children. So food is a really tough thing. It's tough for parents, in a very busy life to be able to, all sit down together for supper and all eat the same thing at the end of a long day. It can be tough. So we're trying to think about the ways in which we can support caregivers to create these environments for their children.
If you could help me figure out how to get all my children to eat the same meal every night, I'd be very happy. And jokes aside, I do think being educated on children's nutrition and just having, that peace of mind that you're doing the right thing and knowing that children are going to eat a little bit differently and may not be the emotional eaters that we've all become in our old age would be really useful. And I'm wondering, does your center provide resources for parents for nutrition in those early years?
Yeah, so while we haven't developed resources ourselves, that will certainly be something to come. What we do is share a lot. So we are fairly active on social media, both on Facebook and Twitter. And we do a weekly, effort. So it really is a joint effort by my team to put out evidence-based resources that we find for families. There's a lot out there that does exist. We have also hosted webinars and workshops, both on Mount Saint Vincent University campus. And we've also just received some funding to do some webinars, so some online sessions. And one area that we received a lot of interest was around responsive feeding. And this was looking at mostly supporting early childhood educators and practices related to that. And it is a bit different from the home environment because usually in childcare settings, food is provided through a family style approach. So all children are eating the same thing. There is no other option for children unless there's a dietary restriction. So, childcares, do have that aspect figured out in that, ensuring that kind of family style sitting together around a table, all eating the same thing, and having, good conversation with the kids around the food, but also just, having conversation generally as the children are eating, and I think that's certainly something in the most recent food guide, Canada's food guide recommendations that was around enjoying food with others. And as much as I think there's been a lot of discussion about the kinds of food we should and shouldn't eat, there hasn't been as much discussion about how we should be eating food, regardless of what it is. And that enjoyment with each other, I think, are part of who we are as people. Food is really, it's how we interact with one another is, when you bring food into the picture, it changes the dynamic. So how can we really, think about, of course, the quality of that food that we are eating, but also those interactions that we're having with one another. And also with young children, there's so many developmental, there's so many opportunities for learning. So things like even just, encouraging children to serve themselves, not only are they, learning a bit of independence, they're also, there's some physical skills in just kind of using different utensils to kind of work with that. So not only are there all the health benefits with the food aspect, there's also a lot of other social and physical benefits in focusing on meals together.
No, I noticed that recently with my daughter and pouring the Brita, and two of them have been able to pour their own water for quite some time. And for the last year, I've been really encouraging my youngest pouring her own glass of water. And, there's been some spills along the way, but recently it's been perfected. And I think so often as parents, especially nowadays, your immediate instinct is to do it for them. And I think it was really, really interesting that you said that, because I was thinking the same thing. Eventually, they're going to have to learn to pour their own water. So a little spilled water isn't going to hurt anyone along the way. So that was a triumph recently in my house. And just picking back up on eating and emotional eating, I'd be remiss to not comment on the last couple months and the crazy times that we currently find ourselves in with the pandemic. And I know that you and your team have also reacted and shifted focus to COVID-19 related research. I saw recently that you received over 2,000 responses to your online survey. Can you tell our listeners just a little bit about that work and what you intend to accomplish?
Absolutely. So, following, I think I still remember that weekend where things just really start to shift really rapidly. I think our immediate reaction was in our research team was thinking about, the short-term implications on research. But as we all settled into what was then our and continues to be now our new normal, we started to think about the impacts on families with young children. And a lot of us, myself included, having young children at the home and thinking about the challenges that it really has made for us, but also the different opportunities that it's provided for families to be more connected, to not be as busy running off to all the different activities. It started to get us to think about what we might be able to learn from this experience, and also what not only learn for the sake of learning, but also learn to inform the supports that are necessary. So there's a lot of conversation now about a second wave potentially coming now that this wave has sort of started to diminish, and that just signals even more so the importance of better understanding what families need. So we decided to launch a survey for families with young children in the Maritimes. So it was across the Maritimes. And as you mentioned, we had great response. We were so impressed by the response from parents. And honestly, I was really moved by and really inspired by the amount of heart that people poured into their responses. So not only did families tell us about, changes to routines, the loss of services, those kinds of things, and sort of the traditional survey format, but they also shared through some of our open-ended questions, just their day-to-day experiences and what this has meant for them and their family life. And we're right now kind of going through those data to better understand what some of the common experiences have been, what some of the different predictors of changes have been as well. So better understanding how things like working from home. So if that is something that you're experiencing and you're also balancing parenting, how does that influence some of the things that you're seeing in your children, or some of the things that you're able to do as a family during this time? So we're really kind of at the point now where we're analyzing data, and a subsequent phase that we've just received some internal funding for at Mount Saint Vincent University. We'll be following up with doing some individual interviews with families. So we're looking forward to speaking more to better understand those kind of unique experiences, but also to understand how there are some commonalities across the experiences that can inform supports that need to be developed to ensure that families aren't struggling. Because that's certainly one of the things we're hearing, is that this is tough. It's tough for families with kids, and particularly with young kids. It seems like there does seem to be some differences in their experiences.
For sure. And, I've 3 kids at home, and I'm working from home as we speak right now. And I think when I took your survey, I think as parents, we really take for granted how much we are juggling right now. I think obviously we knew we were under a great deal of pressure and stress. But until I actually sat down and answered your questions and was really thinking about what those days look like and all the different components within, as I realized how many hats I was putting on in the run of the day, be it, gymnastics coach or dance instructor or school teacher, full-time employee. And it was really interesting. So I'm really interested to see the results.
Thanks. We're looking forward to sharing it. I mean, it really has been a really meaningful project for me. I think as I'm also balancing some of those realities, and just trying to do my best as a parent and also as a full-time employee. I think it's been a really important project, and we're looking forward to getting those results out there quite fast.
I think just in general, your research, the center, the team, it's also important because I think everyone can relate to early childhood education, early childhood development, and especially those with children or young children in the home. And I just wanted to get aspirational for a moment here and just ask you what you think you've been able to achieve in the past, but where you see the future and the potential impact you and your team, the center as a whole, could have on Nova Scotians.
That's a big question.
Huge question.
It all.
I barely got it out. It was so big. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think in the early days of establishing the research center, it really is about kind of building the foundation of the work that we do. So I think taking the time to develop relationship with government, and I was fortunate to come in with some of those relationships already. Also community. So one partner that we've been developing relationships with, and we have a project ongoing, is ISANS, the Immigrant Services Association of Nova Scotia, in which we're trying to better understand the experiences of newcomers with young children as well. So really trying to build relationship with different communities to better understand overall the supports that might be needed for families, and to take the time to build those relationships has been really critical to the foundation of the work. So a lot of those kind of planting seeds as an early career researcher, I think especially in the work that I do, it's really hard to just jump into kind of those 5-year projects without kind of setting the stage and building that foundation. So over the next 8 years, I suppose, of the research chair, or 7 years now, I'm hoping that will just continue, and that our research will continue to be informed by the needs of government, by the needs of community, so that it really is kind of that authentic partnership that I spoke to, that I've learned about. And that I'm trying to build, so that it's not only kind of research informing change or practice change or policy change, but it's also what's happening in community that's informing our research goals and our research objectives. The more that I see that people are seeing research as something that can support their work, not something that they have to participate in and it's kind of published in an academic sphere, but the more that it has real world impact, that's really where I'll feel like our research center has been successful.
That's fantastic. I think that was an excellent way to sum it up. And I can say on behalf of Research Nova Scotia that we're very proud to have been able to support the center and the work that you do each and every day. And once again, I would like to thank you for joining us today to share a little bit more about the work that you do at the Early Childhood Collaborative Research Center at the Mount. So thank you very much.
Thanks for the opportunity.
To find out more about this podcast and the research featured in this episode, visit researchnovascotia.ca. My name's Reese Waters, and we will see you next time.